Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another fun beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll always know when we're posting new content. Today's project is a really fun pendant design that features a stunning, gorgeous 27mm Swarovski crystal stone. I just think you could dive right into these. I'm actually calling this pendant the Looking Glass Pendant, and I hope it seems pretty obvious why. This particular stone is in Swarovski's white opal, but if you head on over to EurekaCrystalBeads.com, we do have other amazing colors to choose from in both the stone and the other beads, which I'll go over in just a second. So I wanted to tell you a couple of the things that I like about this design and who I think it's most geared towards. So first of all, this would be a great pendant design for a beginner beader. Now, perhaps not someone who has never touched a thread and needle before. Definitely you're going to want to be someone who knows how to end your thread or start a new thread should your thread break. You know, you want a little bit of experience under your belt, but overall I would say that this would be good for the adventurous beginner, or perhaps the beginner intermediate level. So what's nice is that oftentimes when you see bezels that have really large stones like this, they're usually very intricate and very time consuming. And what's great about this is that this isn't just, you know, a one evening project. This is really just a 1 to 2 hour project. So you're going to get this done easily in an evening, and you'll still get to bed on time. So another thing that I like about this design is that the nature of the bezel doesn't cover up a lot of the stone. So that's what's really going to allow a lot of the light to shine into that beautiful, beautiful stone. And the last thing I want to mention is that this design only uses 4 types of beads. That's it. Right here, that's it. And all of them are ones that we have in many different colors. So let's go over what exactly we're going to be using. So first I have a Miyuki size 15 seed bead. Now in this case, you could use Miyuki or Toho. Where it's going to be used is just on either side of our bail here. So it's okay whether it's Miyuki or Toho, because there is about a hair's size difference between the two brands. So sometimes depending on the pattern, that difference can make or break whether a pattern works or not. But in this case, Miyuki or Toho is fine. So go with whichever color you'll love more. This one does happen to be Miyuki. I have a size 11 seed bead here. This one is Miyuki as well, and I would recommend sticking with Miyuki. You could try Toho. I have not tested this with Toho, and like I said, there is a little bit of a size difference, so I cannot say for sure that Toho would work. This is a very, it's a nice tight bezel. And because Toho is a hair larger, I don't know if it would hold the stone in quite as tight. So stick with Miyuki unless you want to try being a little guinea pig for Toho. Next, we have really fun half tila beads. So these are a 2-hole bead, like a nice rectangle with a little bit of a curved edge on either long end. And if you didn't know, there are tilas, half tilas, and quarter tilas. And this happens to be the size right in the middle. These are half tilas, which are actually my favorite because they're not too big, not too small. And lastly, I have 3mm Swarovski crystals. And this project will take exactly 20 of them. And it will take 40 of our half tilas. So that's it. That's all you need. Alongside that, of course, I have my stone here and 6-pound fire line and a size 12 needle. And along with this nice, simple, basic technique, which again, I don't think is something you see too often for bezeling such a large stone. The really most intricate part is that you're going to learn how to make a really lovely herringbone bail. So hopefully you'll love that as well. All right, let's get started. Okay, now let's get started. So I have a size 12 needle threaded up with about 3 feet of 6-pound fire line. Now normally with these types of colors that I'm using here for this particular sample, I would want to use crystal fire line, but for the sake of the video and for my eyes and yours, I am going to use the smoke fire line just so it shows up a little bit easier on the video. Now I do want to tell you that the original sample I made with these exact colors also used the smoke fire line, and it actually wasn't too noticeable. So you could actually get away with using smoke if you absolutely need to, but for something this light, I would probably recommend crystal ultimately. So I'm going to start by loading on 20 half tilas, and I'm going to have a size 11 seed bead in between each one. And I'm just going to be utilizing one hole of the half tila for now, because remember, these are a 2-hole bead. Now, something that I find helpful when I'm going to do something like this, especially because I don't want to allow myself to get distracted and load on one too few or one too many, is I like to pre-count at least my tilas, my half tilas there, because that way I don't even have to think about it. I can just keep chit-chatting or pay attention to my cat jumping up on my chair or any number of things. And I know that at the end of the day, I'm not going to get too far into my project realizing a little bit later that I actually had too many or not enough. So these pick up pretty easily, which is nice. And I'm using this half tila in a really pretty pearlescent white color, but definitely check out the other colors that we have, because there's a lot of options for this pendant, which could be a lot of fun. So now one thing you want to make sure of is that if you started with a half tila, you want to end with a seed bead. Or if you started with a seed bead, you'd end with a half tila. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to get these to come together into a loop. So that's why we want to make sure that whatever bead we started with is not the bead we finished with, because we want it to be a continuous loop. Now, what I like to do in this case is I'm going to take my tail and my working thread and I'm going to tie them into a square knot, which is kind of like a double knot, but your second knot is backwards. So if it's right over left for the first knot, your second knot will be left over right. And as far as how long of a tail to leave, that's really up to you. You won't be utilizing it for anything. You'll just be sticking a needle on it later and weaving it in. And you should know hopefully about how long you need to have there to do that with. I usually like to leave a couple of inches and I'm pretty good. I know other beaders who like to leave 6 inches. So that's just something to keep in mind. But if you do 3 feet of fire line, that should be sufficient for the whole pendant, even if you leave a tail that's a little bit longer. So I have my little knot tied there. And what I like to do is I like to get my square knot to be tight and then I pull everything else down. So as you can see, because we've utilized just one hole, they tend to kind of flop in and out like this. Don't worry about that right now. The next steps that we do will write them all in the same direction. Now, the last thing I want to do before I continue to the next step is I want to pass through the next several beads, kind of whatever really my needle just happens to pop through. But ultimately, I want to be popping out of one of the half tilas. Okay, and if you have to tug this a little bit tighter again, that's okay. So now, that's what we got. That's what we got. Now, I'm going to go up through the top hole. I'm getting caught in my bead mat here. I'm going to go through the top hole in the same half tila that I'm coming out from. Like this. This is also going to reverse my direction around my circle. And at this point, I would say once we're a step or two beyond this, at that point you can take a needle and weave this in if you want to get it out of the way. I just don't like to do it right away because I'm still kind of working within the same ring that that knot was pulled into. But once I get past the next step, I'll usually take care of that. So now we're going to be using our 3mm crystals for step number 2. I'm going to pick up one of my 3mm crystals and we're going to head right into the top hole of the very next half tila. Now you want to pull just enough to get it to pull down into its little spot here. We don't have to pull like our life depends on it. The tighter you pull now, it may be a little trickier later because we're going to have to go back through some of these. So just pull just enough to get it down to pop into place, and that's going to be nice, sufficient medium tension. So all we're going to do is go all the way around until we come out of the other side, or rather the other side of the circle when we get back to over here. And I'll see you back in just a minute as I keep heading around the circle. Okay, I'm just getting my last 3mm bicone right into there. So I'm going to go through the top hole of that last half tila, but then I'm going to keep going a little bit, just a few beads past that. Nothing specific. Again, just kind of whatever your needle happens to pop through. Now, if your circle looks a little bit wonky like that, don't worry about it. That's because it's trying to be really, really flat. But again, remember, eventually it's going to sit on the stone and it is going to curve down a little bit. So that's okay. So the next step might be a little unexpected. Now is when we're going to do our bail. And usually, at least in my experience, the bail comes more towards the end. But what I found when doing the prototype for this pendant is that when I left the bail for the end, this outer area had gotten so tight that I really couldn't get my needle in and out of it. So upon prototype number 2, I had to figure out a way for the bail to come at this point when it was still going to be easy and slightly loose enough. Not that it's loose, but there's just a little bit of wiggle room to get your needle in there. I had to figure out a way for it to do it now instead. So after you've gone through a few beads, you want to, and by going through a half tila, so make sure that that's where your exit point is. And we're going to be using our size 11 seed beads here, as well as our Miyuki 15s. And we're going to make a really neat little flat herringbone bail. So the way it's going to start is I'm going to take 2 of my 11s here, and I'm going to go to the half tila that I'm coming out of, and you can see I'm coming out of the left side of that hole, and I'm going to circle back through into that same half tila again. So as you can see, my thread and my needle are coming out of the same bead, the same hole, and the same side of that hole. Let me pull this all the way down. We're going to get our 2 little size 11s sitting right on top of the short end of that half tila, and you're going to notice that they sit at a little bit of a V. Now that's actually a very, very specific look of herringbone, and that's great. That's exactly what we want. So next, we're going to turn around and go right back through the size 11 that's on the side of our working thread. And you're going to exit out of just the center of those 2 beads. You're not going to go through the other 11. Because here is where you're going to pick up 2 more 11s. And then you're going to pass down through the other 11, just like that. And the 2 beads we're adding now, we want to encourage into that same V position. As you can see, it doesn't always pop into place for you right away. Sometimes I'll use my needle or my fingertip or even a little awl, and you want to just encourage it right into place, just like that. Now, with flat herringbone, we could, at this point, just make a little U-turn and go right back up into that bead to add the next pair. And that's perfectly fine. However, you will see a little tiny stitch of thread right on the outside, and in many beading circles, that's just fine. But there is a little way that you can use a 15 to help cover that up. So now is when we're going to pick up that little Miyuki 15, or again, in this case, it could be a Toho. And now we're going to go up through that bead. And we're going to have a nice little accent on the outside that will also help to cover that stitch of thread. So now is when we're going to pick up our next 2 size 11s and go down through the other half of that little herringbone pair at the top. And again, if it doesn't want to pop into place into that little V, just encourage it into place with your fingertip or your needle. That's very important because if you don't do that and then it kind of pops into place later, it could affect some tension. So best to get it fixed right there. I'm going to turn my work just because I always like to keep turning my work. Now is when I will pick up another 15. Make my little turn there to head up that last bead. So you can see this 15 sits a little higher than the last 15. That's normal. They're going to kind of alternate going up the little strip of herringbone that we're making, because that's essentially what we're doing. We're making a little strip, a very thin strip of flat herringbone. And then what we're going to end up doing is sewing it into a circle. And that circle is what's going to be our bail. So I just do one more turnaround here. I have my 15 on my needle, going up the bead on my right side, picking up my 2 11s, going down the bead on the left side. Again, pop them into place. You want to see that nice, neat, clean V shape. All right, so now it's just time for another 15 and then head back up again. So I'm gonna get a little bit more of this done and I'll come back in just a second to show you what's next. Okay, so I've worked up a beautiful little, very lacy looking strip of herringbone. This is again flat herringbone, as you can see, with little fun studded edges with our 15s, which I think adds a nice little detail. So as far as how long I made this particular one is what I'm going to call 16 pairs high. So that's a pair and this is a pair, and so I counted up. Or you could just count up one side, it's the same thing. But I made 16 herringbone pairs high for this sort of herringbone tower. Now that number might change for you depending on what you're going to be putting through your bail. Now I would say do minimum 16. The reason I say do at least this long is because if it's much shorter, it's a little bit harder to fold down into your loop unless you really leave intentionally loose tension, and you don't really want to do that. So I would say make it at least that big, and you're going to get kind of a good size bail, I think, considering the bulk of the final pendant. You can certainly go longer if you have something in mind that's going to be going through this loop that's going to be thicker. Now, to actually bring this down into the loop, the last thing I did was I picked up my little 15 here. I'll loosen that back up so you can see. And I headed back up as if I was now preparing myself to add on 2 more 11s, but I'm not going to do that. I am, however, going to go down the other 11. We'll just pretend like I had added on 2 more 11s, but it's the same motion. So now what we're going to do is just fold this down. And if you get a little bit of resistance, that's okay. You can kind of push it down a little bit and the tension just kind of evens out, I guess is the best way that I can describe it. So when we started, we were coming out of the tila here, the half tila, and we had looped back up through it, but adding on 2 11s. We're going to do basically the same sort of thread path with the 2 11s that we have up here, which is why I wanted you to come out of the other side, because now we're coming out in the same direction to loop back around through. So you're going to fold this down like that, just kind of make it meet down at the half tila. And if your thread is on this side, that's the side you're going to head into that same half tila and right into that same top loop that your line is running through when you added the crystals. I might have to move this a little bit just so I can get in there. It's not always easy to hold things so you guys can see and so I can see. There we go. Just like that. And we're going to just bring this down. But now we have to secure the other side. So our thread is now on this side of our half tila. We're going to go back through both of the 11s that are there at the bottom. And it's okay if it's not super tight yet. Once you get back through the 11s, you can see it loosened right up. Once you get back through the 2 11s, then you can give it a nice good tug. So you can see we get this little loop. As you pull it down, it comes together, and the front should look like the back. Now I am going to loop through it one more time just for reinforcement purposes. And again, if it loosens up a little bit, that's okay. You've only gone through it once. This is also, again, why it's good to loop through it again. There we go. Just like that. Pretty little herringbone bail. So now I'm coming out of my 2 size 11s on this side. I'm going to go back through the top hole of the half tila just because I want to be coming out of this sort of outer row where we have our crystals. And right now I can't do that because I'd have to sort of jump down into the crystal, and I want to go a little bit more fluidly in line with the thread path that's already there. So I'm going to pop out of that first crystal, just like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add in another row of tilas coming, or half tilas coming off of the ones we have now. All right, so I've pulled out another counted 20 half tilas. And again, I'm coming out of that crystal there. I'm going to pick up one of my half tilas, go through any hole you like, and I'm going to go through the next crystal, in and out of that next crystal. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a little half tila kind of set into place right next to the tila, that's the half tila that's already there. But they might want to sit a little bit funny. One might want to slightly overlap the other. That's fine. But what you are going to do is encourage it to sit next to it, just like that. Because what we're essentially doing is we're making the front all over again, but it's going to be on the back. So this is going to be on the front of the stone, and then the other row of half tilas we're adding are going to be on the back of the stone. So let me show you that again. I'm coming out of the crystal. I'm picking up another of my half tilas. I'm going in and out of the crystal. And again, encourage it to sit sort of down next to the tila that you the half tila that you skipped over. If I've said tila anytime during this video, I apologize. Obviously, they're all half tilas. I've meant to say half tilas. Now, what you want to make sure you don't do is have some on this side and some kind of going back on the other side. Make sure they're all, pick whichever side you want to be the back and have them all on the back. So make sure you flip it and you have it sit on the back like that. Okay, so I'm gonna be back in a minute once I've gone all the way around. Okay, so I have all of my 20 new half tilas sewn into place. And right in between the half tila, sort of where they come together, that's where our stone, this edge of our stone, is going to end up fitting right in. So all I did after I added in the last half tila, which was the one that's right at the bail, is I went through the crystal to lock it down into place, and then went one more bead, which is the next half tila, and then now I'm going to just go up into the second hole of that half tila, which is also going to reverse my direction, which for me works out because I like working counterclockwise. So now we're going to be using just 11s, and then our project is done. So I'm going to pick up an 11, and I'm going to go through the top hole of the next half tila, just like this. And you'll notice that we're mimicking what we did at the beginning on the other side, because the front and the back are the exact same thing. Now I'm going to pick up another one, and I'm going to go through. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go till I'm about at the halfway point. And the reason that I'm going to stop at the halfway point is because at that point, I'm going to want to stick my stone inside the setting as I continue on. I find that if you kept going all the way around, the top part of this bezel is going to be a bit too closed up, and it's going to be much more difficult to get your stone in. But you have to have some amount of these 11s in there. Otherwise, they're not going to stay as tight, and you're not going to be able to keep your stone in there as easily while they're all still kind of loose and flopping around. So I'm going to get about to the halfway point, which I'm almost at. You can see it goes nice and fast. Once you get the hang of this pendant, you're going to be whipping these out in an hour or less. I promise you that. Okay, so about that halfway point, I'm going to take my big, beautiful stone. I'm going to stick it right in there. And I'm going to encourage all of those half tilas to sit on top of the stone. They'll end up holding the stone in sort of like prongs. Now, it might seem a little bit wonky, but that's okay. Now, watch what happens when I pull this. See how it pulls in nice and tight? That's what the whole thing will look like. Right now, obviously, we still have half of it that's a little bit loose, so the whole thing seems a little bit loose. But what you're going to want to do now, as you add more of your size 11s, is you're going to want to give it a nice little tug each time. So I picked up an 11. I'm going through the next half tila. Give it a tug. You want to get this nice and tight so that stone is really, really in there. Again, pull it through. Give it a tug. So now I'm at the very top again, so I'm going to head through, and then just whatever my needle kind of happens to pop through to get that last one to place. And I'm really going to give it a nice little tug. And look at that. Now, right now, if I let it go, it could loosen up a little bit. You can even see a little bit of my thread showing right there. That's because we're going to go around a little bit more to help to keep this nice and tight before we weave out our thread. But look at that. It's just so neat and clean and fun. And I think you get this really pretty, beautiful, clean, simple look by using, see, as you can see, it just loosened back up on me because I put it down. So you're going to want to avoid putting it down until you have it tightened up just a little bit more. But as you can see, I got it right back in there nice and easily. So keep holding on to it. And we're going to keep going around, going through the 11s and that same top hole of the half tilas. And you can go through a bunch at once. Whatever your needle happens to pop through, just kind of let it pop through, at least a few at a time. There we go, just like that. And just keep pulling tight. Because this side's nice and tight. We've woven so far beyond that. That back circle of beads is not loosening up. It's not going anywhere. But this one is still gonna wanna loosen up because the half tilas still kind of wanna spring out a little bit. But that's fine because that's why we're doing this step here. And it's gonna hold them in beautifully. Okay, we're at least going to go one full circle, and then we're going to start to tie some knots. Now the knots are not only going to secure our thread, but it's also going to help keep this reinforcing that we're doing from loosening up. It's going to help us to keep it nice and tight as we continue to go around and reinforce by getting a few knots in there under our belt. So I'm going to go a little bit more, and then I'm going to tie a half hitch knot. Okay, give it a nice good tug. As you can see, I can let go of it now when it's not loosening up. If I messed with it enough, I could loosen it all up again. But right now, it's at least to the point where I can do that and it's not going anywhere. So I'm going to work my needle right underneath the threads that are passing through those beads. And you'll see that I get my little loop here. I go through my loop, and when I pull it down, and make sure you pull it down right in the spot where your working thread was exiting out of your beadwork. It's easy for that loop to kind of hop over a bead, and then when you close your loop, you're going to have thread on the outside of your bead. So make sure you close it down carefully, and that knot already is going to help this to stay tight as we continue to do a little more reinforcing and some more knots. So this is all, at this point now, we're also weaving out our thread. That's the end goal that we're at right now. So as we continue to go around and reinforce, we are simultaneously and securely ending our thread as well by continuing to do some of those half hitch knots. Just like that. Again, just whatever your needle happens to pop through. I only went through a couple of beads there. I'm not going to keep messing with it, trying to go through a bunch more at once, because I'll spend more time doing that than I will had I just passed through and then picked another few to do. Another neat thing about this is, from a design perspective, is I love that we have this crystal line all on the very outside edge of the crystal. It creates a really beautiful framework, and it's a way for you to add a really fun pop of color. So what I did was I picked a half tila and an 11 seed bead that were similar. So I have both of them in white. And then I picked my 3mm crystal to match the 15. So you have the 3mm in a blue dotted along the edge, and then you have a blue in the 15 dotted along the edge of the bail. So that's something to keep in mind if you're picking out your own colors, is match the 15 to the crystal and have your 11 and your tila sort of match, and you'll have sort of like an instant successful color combination as far as how they're balanced. But you can stray from that as much as you want. You could have every bead in here be a different color if you want. But that's just sort of a nice little easy way for you to make sure that your colors are going to sort of sit nicely composed on the pendant. All right, so I'm going to get this last one in there. And then you never want to cut right next to a knot. As I've said in numerous previous videos, you want to weave a little bit past, and then you can snip your thread. So again, we started with only about 3 feet, and that's what we had left. So we probably only needed about 2.5 feet, but you never want to have it come down to the wire, so to speak, and not have enough left to really do your weaving with. So that 3 feet worked out pretty perfectly. And here we have it. A lovely, clean looking pendant, which is another reason, like I said, that I like it, is because it's simple. It really shows off this beautiful stone, lets so much light pass through. It's the same on the front and the back. And then hopefully you learn something sort of fun with that herringbone veil. Now, as far as what you could wear this on, I think these look absolutely stunning on long chains or long, thinly strung beads, like small beads or a couple of strands of tiny beads. I think these look beautiful, beautiful long. But of course, they could look good at any length, but I think they really lend themselves to a beautiful, long, summery look. And then I think I would go a bit shorter in the winter, maybe you know, closer to the neck, or even maybe 20 inches over a turtleneck or something. But I think for summer, I just love this with wearing it with a beautiful flowy dress and something really long. And I think this is a really fun, versatile piece. All right, guys, that wraps it up. Thanks for watching. Make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com for everything I used in this video. We're going to link you below as well in the description box to all of these exact beads and these exact colors. But like I said, on the website, we have all of these beads and components in so many different colors. You could have just absolute endless possibilities. All right, guys, thanks for watching. See you next time.